Twisted Metal was really inspired, I think, by myself and a fellow designer, Mike Yam at Sony. It was basically inspired by our deep love of action movies. A lot of critics, I think, and people sort of say, do we really need another car chase and things like that? And everyone's always bashing on car chases, but we love car chases. And, what we really wanted to do with Twisted Metal was sort of give players the opportunity, and as importantly, give ourselves the opportunity to actually participate in an interactive car chase, to actually be behind the wheel of a car chase, like in the movie Speed or Terminator or The French Connection. That was really the whole creative inspiration, and then it just happened to come along at a time when the technology was right. When we met with our developers, Single Track up in Utah, that was really the first time that we had really experienced affordable 3D that your home consumer could buy, and we realized that that idea, that inspiration for sort of wanting to put the player in a Hollywood action movie could actually finally be done, via this really cool technology, which allowed you to actually live in these worlds and things like that. So. The first one wasn't. The first one was, I think the first one had all the heart that we wanted it to have. I mean, the first one is very much sort of like, we always compare it to sort of like a garage band version of, what ultimately the game ended up being, which is Twisted Metal 2. The first one had all the heart that we wanted it to have, but it lacked a lot in terms of presentation, gameplay, things like that. But it wasn't until the second one that we were really able to make the game everything that we originally intended to make. Again, I'd have to say the gameplay. There's a lot of things in Twisted 2 that I'm real proud of, that I think that everyone involved with the product really, put into it and should be proud of. But the most important thing to me about any game, and especially Twisted 2, is just the jump in gameplay from 1 to 2, and the fact that, especially when you're competing with a friend and you're fighting with a friend, it's such a richer experience. There's so much more strategy, so much more depth to what you can do, that I think that's the thing that I'm really most proudest of, that we were able to learn what it takes to get that gameplay and figure out how to execute it. I think the biggest leap was just, I think gameplay says it all. I think it was just a real, Twisted Metal 1 was my second game as a designer. It was the developer's first game as a developer, and in that learning time between Twisted 1 and Twisted 2, we really began to understand what it means to have good gameplay, strategy, risk and reward, payoff, things like that really make players stay with a game. Whereas Twisted Metal 1 it almost felt more thrown together than the second one. So gameplay, I guess, would be the key thing. I really like mapping. I think mapping is just, the key to what it means to be a designer. I mean, I love to sit down at the whiteboard, either with myself or with my fellow designers or fellow development team, and just really sit there with all these markers and figure out what the level is going to look like, or figure out what the strategy is in the level, or what the gameplay is in the level, and what the cool effects are. That really is the most fun. Not only because it's you get to let your imagination run wild, but because 12, 13, 14 months later, you get to see that terrible looking stick figure map on your whiteboard in your office is now translated into a playable video game with great graphics and sound and playability. So I think mapping would be the most fun thing that I do. I don't really have an average day in the sense that every day I come in and I shut my door and I design for 2 hours, and then after, it's not that structured at all. All of my days are basically centered around making sure that the game that I'm working on at the time, and I only work on one game at a time, is all the elements are being poured into it. And some days that'll mean that I'm working on a map all day long for a certain level of the game. Other days that'll mean I'm working with the developers of the game or the artists, trying to figure out who the characters are that live in the world of the game. all the way up to, dealing with marketing, who's trying to come up with a great slant for the ad in the magazines or television, or working with the testers to try to figure out where all the bugs are to make sure we can release the game on time. So it's just a whole, amalgam, I guess, of things that I do. But the cool thing about my job that I love about it is that I get this great variety of stuff that I get to do, but it's all centered around one thing, which is making a really great game. I think if you look at the games I've done, if you look at Twisted Metal 1, Twisted Metal 2, the game I'm working on now, it's very apparent what I think about violence in video games. I think I have no problem with it. I mean, I feel it's a way, it's an outlet for, it's a release, I think, for the things that we have inside. I think it's crazy if someone tells you that, we are not violent creatures, and I would much rather rip someone's head off in a video game and get it out of my system than do it in the real world. And I think it allows that. I think it's one of the few mediums that does allow that. There's a game, it came out a while back, called Flashback, which came out for the 16-bit systems, PC, stuff like that, and that was really the first time ever that I had played a game that really immersed me in that world. I mean, for however long it took me to finish that game, I was there, I was in that world, and that, I think, is something that I hope that I can do one day, is really present players with gameplay in worlds that just totally suck them in and make them forget where they are. So I would say it would have been Flashback. I mean, today there are certainly games that are doing that very well today on PlayStation and other systems, just some wonderful games out there. But I think Flashback really, for me, was the first one that did it, and it sort of holds that ranking in my mind as the greatest game of all time, which I wish I would have done it, and I hope one day I can. I would love, well, I don't know if I would love to, because usually I usually find that when you actually get into the job that you think is so great, it turns out to be really great, but there's a lot of hard work with it. So I don't think there's a perfect job out there. I love what I do. I wouldn't trade it for anything, and in fact, I would, as long as my bills were paid and I could take care of my family, I, would do it for free. But I would, I'd like to see myself doing comic books one day. I'd love to. I can't draw at all, but I'd love to write comic books someday. There's a couple things I would say. One is that it really isn't, at least at this point in time, that hard to get into the industry. At an entry-level point, either through being a tester, being an artist, being a programmer. I mean, if you really want to get in, you will find a way in. I'm not going to sit here and give you a secret way in, because there isn't one. It's basically, if it's something you want to do, you'll find a way to do it. What I will say is that be able to distinguish yourself from being a fan, which is a wonderful thing to be, from being a game maker. And they're entirely two different things. And I see a lot of people come in and they're huge game fans, but when they sit down to make a game, they really don't care so much about what goes into the game. They just want to regenerate what they've, or regurgitate what they've already seen. So I think really make sure you want to make games, and you should be able to design games. I always say, you should be able to have a coconut and a crayon and make something fun out of it. And the excuses of, well, I don't have a SGI machine and I don't have a 200 megahertz Pentium. I mean, understand what it means to make games and gameplay, and study the great games. Study chess, study checkers. Understand why there's as much technology in Street Fighter 2 as there is chess in Street Fighter 2. And those are the things I think that the game business really needs, is people who understand gameplay. So I would say that learn what game making is, make sure you really want to make games, and then just find a way to get in and keep pushing, and don't let anyone discourage you, because it's certainly doable. Hell, as they say, if I did it, anybody can do it. So. I never really intended to get into the game business. It was really a total fluke. I had always played games as a kid and stuff, and I'd always been a video game fan, but my initial intention was to go into filmmaking, and I'd gone to film school and all that, and basically the video game thing kind of happened while I had just gotten out of film school, and I was sort of waiting for, the call from Steven Spielberg or George Lucas or something. And, in the meantime, I figured it would, I needed to eat, and make money and stuff, so I had heard about this job as, game testers, which basically what I thought at the time, which is not the case, that all they did was sit around all day and play video games. So I figured, oh, this will be something cool to, bide my time and make some money, until I get to make movies. And I kind of fell into it like that and got the job from Sony back when Sony was Sony ImageSoft. And, once I got there, I started seeing the potential of the next generation of video games, and seeing how, as game designers, we can take games beyond the simple side-scrolling, stuff that we had been seeing for the last 5 or 6 years, and really take players into a new, sort of a new direction of fun and in gameplay. So, since then I just sort of haven't looked back. I just started as a tester and kept going. It was an accident, really.